I think I need a recap from last week.
It was the prologue. We were told a bunch of stuff that's going to happen that we already know is going to happen, and we were recapped on what we missed from the previous act in case we dozed off during the first act or were busy doing other things.
So now we're going into Act 2, Scene 1. So Romeo has met Juliet, is very much in love, and he's so in love with her that he finds he just cannot leave, even though the party is over and Capulet has sent everybody home. So we're going to go and watch him kind of leap over the garden wall and into the garden. And meanwhile, his bros, Benvolio and Mercutio, are looking around for him. And that's who we're going to spend this scene with, Mercutio and Benvolio. Nice. So we have 3 characters, Romeo, who's only there for a hot minute. Then we have Benvolio and Mercutio. So who would like to be Romeo?
I will read Romeo and Dip.
Great. Now we've got Benvolio.
I'll do Benvolio.
And Mercutio.
I'll do it.
Can I go forward when my heart is here? Turn back, dull earth, and find thy center out.
He withdraws. Enter Benvolio with Mercutio.
Romeo, my cousin Romeo. Romeo!
He is wise, and on my life have stolen him home to bed.
He ran this way and leapt this orchard wall. Call, good Mercutio.
Nay, I'll conjure too. Romeo, humors, madman, passion, lover, appear thou in the likeness of a sigh. Speak but one rhyme and I am satisfied. Cry but I me, pronounce but love and dove. Speak to my gossip Venice one fair word, one nickname for her purblind son and heir. Young Abraham Cupid, he that shot so trim, when King coped to loved the beggar maid. He heareth not, he stirreth not, he moveth not. The ape is dead, and I must conjure him. I conjure thee by Rosaline's bright eyes, by her high forehead and her scarlet lip, by her fine foot, straight leg, and quivering thigh, and the dimenses that there adjacent lie, that in thy likeness thou appear to us.
And if he hear thee, thou wilt anger him.
This cannot anger him. 'Twould anger him to raise a spirit in his mistress' circle of some strange nature, letting it there stand till she had laid it and conjured it down. That were some spite. My invocation is fair and honest, and his mistress' name I conjure only but to rise up him.
Come, he hath hid himself among these trees, to be consorted with the humorous night. Blind is his love, and best befits the dark.
If love be blind, love cannot hit the mark. Now will he sit under a medlar tree and wish his mistress were that kind of fruit, as maids call medlars when they laugh alone. Oh, Romeo, that she were, oh, that she were, an open arse, thou a poprin pear. Romeo, good night. I'll to my truckle bed. This field bed is too cold for me to sleep. Come, shall we go?
Go then, for 'tis in vain to seek him here that means not to be found.
They exit. Yeah.
Mercutio laying down some more wisdom.
If only she was an open ass.
I've got notes here. So, we'll get to the open ass in a sec.
I bet those are notes.
So at the top, Romeo says, oh, turn back, dull earth, and find thy center out. So this is referring to the classic, like, ashes to ashes and dust to dust, earth to earth, which is implying that, like, there's a spirit and then there's your physical body. So he's kind of telling his body to turn back, dull earth, and find thy center. The earth center, you know, is what causes gravity. And so he's saying that Juliet is kind of like drawing him to her. So very cute and sweet. And then he's gone. And then we've got Benvolio and Mercutio kind of crawling around trying to find him, assuming that he is lost. Mercutio is asked to call for him, but he says that he will conjure him instead, and then starts doing this bit that he thinks is hilarious, where he casts a spell to conjure Romeo. And so this kind of starts out like a classic kind of witch's spell, you know, Romeo, humors, come here, whatever. He starts making fun of love poetry, especially because Romeo has probably said some to him lately. He jokes that, you know, cry, I, me, all dramatic like a poem. rhyme, love, and dove, like so many love poems do.
Mhm.
If this were today, he would probably say make up and break up. That's the common line now. And then he prays to Venus, who is goddess of love. We know her maybe better as Aphrodite, and her son Cupid. So here's something interesting. He goes, young Abraham Cupid. And there's lots of spirited scholarly debate as to why he calls him Abraham Cupid. There's actually 3 leading theories. It's not very clear what he meant by this. So the first one is that it's referring to Abraham of the Bible, the biblical Abraham, who is usually portrayed as being very old. So it's kind of like this young, old love, which is playing at, they still, by the way, Mercutio and Benvolio think that he's still in love with Rosalind. So they don't know about Juliet yet. So they're still keeping her in mind. So it's like, oh, it's young love, but it's been going on for a long time. Like that could be what he's getting at. The second theory is that back in this time when he was writing, they called beggars who were legally allowed to be beggars, Abraham beggars. And you were legally allowed to be a beggar if you had some kind of disability, or if you were blind or deaf, something like that, or you couldn't walk, for instance. So you could only be a beggar if you had some physical disability. Cupid is often portrayed as being blind, so there's a connection there, like, oh, you blind Cupid, etc. The last theory is that he meant to write Adam, because there was a really famous archer at the time called Adam Bell that he might be referring to, but that seems like a stretch to me. But either way, so who knows what he's getting at there.
Spelled it away. is that the argument there?
Yeah.
Basically.
Abraham. Oh, damn it. All right. And he never read it again.
Oh,
yeah, we don't have his original writings, so the plays are often like actors half remembering their lines from years ago,
Well, yeah,
so
Shakespeare being like,
yeah, because Romeo and Juliet, I think, had 2 folio editions, and I think 3 or 4 quarto editions. But yeah, the very first one was notably shorter, highly inaccurate, and created by one of the actors who was short on cash and wanted to turn a profit. I mean, this is true of most of Shakespeare's plays. And the editions people usually go with are the first folio edition, which was the first collected edition of Shakespeare's plays assembled by various members of his theater company, like I think 25 years after this play debuted.
Oh my.
So the provenance on any given Shakespeare play is actually pretty shaky.
Pretty shaky spirit.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
So yeah, that's just like a little mystery there as to why that exists. And it could just be a mistake on somebody's part. Next up, we have The Ape is Dead. So this was also kind of a common thing. There would be street performers who had little trained monkeys, and the monkeys could do all kinds of tricks, including playing dead, at which point the person would be like, come back to life, and the monkey would come back to life. So this is a common thing people would know about. Now let's scroll down to the open ass. So
Dive on in.
Fun fact, we're talking about medlar trees. Now, a medlar is a kind of fruit, and a slang for this fruit was the open ass, because if you search up medlar fruit, that's kind of what they look like. Now, this doubly makes sense. This doubly makes sense when you learn that poprin pear was slang for penis.
Ew.
And if you look at a poprin pear, that's what it kind of looks like. So,
no.
Ew, that's disgusting.
Yeah. So it's basically a very, very on the nose joke, oh, if only she were a fruit that looks like an ass, and if only you were a fruit that looks like a penis.
Thanks for that, Mercutio.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the best, hidden joke there.
I love to, it's meant to all be like, they look like this thing, and Shakespeare's like, it's a metaphor, except when Mercutio just literally says, if only she was an open ass. He's like, do you get it? You guys get my amazing metaphor?
It's disgusting, dude.
Weren't we just before this discussing the various levels of horny different authors were? We can't decry just You know, I say Mercutio,
sure.
a free spirit.
Mm.
I support this frank discourse.
Sex positive, surely.
Yes.
Would that
Yes,
Romeo were a
indeed.
poprin pair? It'd probably mellow him out some.
Maybe it would have been simpler if Romeo and Juliet had just slept together that first night.
Could have,
Could
may
have one
have.
night stand. No one would die.
Juliet, she could have been disappointed, and then that could have been the end of it.
This is not a popper pair.
Drew
So
playing
then
the role of
that's an
Mercutio
apple.
in this case.
Yeah, so those are my comprehension notes here. It's worth noting that Romeo and Juliet is written like a comedy, a lot of it. And the thing about Shakespeare's comedies is that you might think that they will be easier to understand, but they're often not, because there's lots of references to modern ballads and modern people, and by modern I mean modern to Shakespeare. So like we don't know them anymore. Like this fruit that we have to like stop and do a whole research to understand this stupid joke.
Be disappointed in this term.
And then just be like, oh.
Oh yeah, all right.
I have not been disappointed by one. perfectly cromulent.
Maybe you could say that Shakespeare knew he'd be read 400 years from now, and that's why he said an open arse to make it more clear to the future reader. You know,
Yeah, actually, we used to got ours. I get ours.
I mean, this
Wanted
is
to pull back
as a genuine statement. Think how many 8th and 9th graders had their minds opened up to actually paying attention to Shakespeare in class by that line.
That
Yeah.
one line, they're like, Shakespeare's
That's a good
awesome.
point. Oh, that you were an open ass.
Yeah, it's great.
Isn't that why all of you guys got passionate about Shakespeare?
Yes, because he actually feels like a real person compared to some of the stuffier classical writers you read. Because all he cares, it's clear what he cared about in life, which was sex.
Yeah.
Relate, word.
Imagine being a teenager and learning about anal sex for the first time through
Through Shakespeare.
Fucking eyes popped open, dude. No question.
Also, the lesson in Shakespeare is that it would have solved everything too. So
Pretty
Now,
much.
not to bring down the timbre of discussion. How do we feel about the blind is his love and best befits the dark bit?
Mhm.
Because it's something I didn't really think about ahead of time. But there is a weird, well, not weird, but there's a recurring element of a lot of the actual romantic scenes throughout happen in nighttime, and obviously the fatal climax takes place at night.
Are
And then
you-
Mercutio immediately swooping in and being like, "Nah, that sucks."
Wait, that did not know that happened. What? All right.
Is the
Yeah.
question like
Well, do we think this is foreshadowing when Mercutio jumps in and says, "If love be
know.
blind, love cannot hit the mark," as a direct repudiation of the arc that this romance is going to follow for the rest of the play,
That's
or
a
if
good
it's
observation.
just a clever line?
it's also I'm I'm in the middle of watching Love is Blind season 3.
There we go, dude. There we go. You're an expert. Let us know.
yeah. Is
well,
It's love.
in the first 2
Is it
seasons,
blind?
I was reading an update on the first 2 seasons, and only 2 couples from season 1 are still together.
Oh wow.
So
So love can kind of see. It seems love
Or the
got
is
Nice
Love
glasses.
Blind?
Love got glasses. Let me tell you. Nothing for it.
We kind of discussed this before we started reading the play, right? Of
I
the
know.
extent to which there's there's the romance between Romeo and Juliet, which is presented as very pure and deep, but then when actually confronting social reality is
Mm.
there's a bunch of problems. And I feel like there's actually a fairly adept back and forth between Benvolio and Mercutio to move things along a little bit, but also remind people the stakes of the plot ahead of the big romantic scene that we know is coming up next.
Oh,
I would
that
say,
you know what was going on there.
Yeah.
Everything's a surprise
spoiler.
to me. Every scene is like, wow, that happened. Cool.
I would definitely say Shakespeare does a good job of treating Romeo and Juliet's love as genuine. He's like, they really care for each other, but having the people who aren't them talk about the more mature experienced views on love, which is like, as Mercutio says, if you just blindly love the first thing you see, you actually cannot ever truly love that thing, and that's where their misfortune kind of comes from.
Mhm.
So he does a good job, I think, Shakespeare, of like showing all the elements of love. Like he does a real thorough examination of, and because usually you get one or the other. You get characters who are out of love and they're critical of it, or you get characters who are so swept up with love they just can't think of any other possibility. So I think these lines are great, especially because Mercutio completes the rhyme to show that he agrees with him with like, if his love is Benvolio says if his love is best befitting for the dark, and that's great for him. Mercutio's like, yeah, maybe that's true, but if so, that's not really a good thing.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
also occurs to me that just in the next scene, we'll get Romeo saying, what light through yonder window breaks. So we have his love is blind and best befits the dark, but Romeo himself is going to invoke a light image in the next scene. Actually, he talks about fire quite a bit, doesn't he, too, when talking about his weirdly Catholic pinings.
I like also when Mercutio starts talking about Rosaline, because it's a really, stuff like this always surprises me because Shakespeare sounds so old because he is old, but then when Mercutio is like, taunting Romeo by talking about Rosaline's quivering thighs, and Benvolio's like, you're gonna piss him off,
You're gonna piss him
it isn't
off.
funny. I'm just like, wow, this is something I've experienced in my life with other men so much. Like the joke going too far when you're like, talking up someone's romantic interest like this. And I was like, oh, this is one of those like surprisingly human things that was around back then too.
Or I mean, even Mercutio's response of, "This won't piss him off. I'm just being honest."
Yeah.
Come on, bro.
Or the whole scenario of two dudes walking around drunk after a party and they can't find their friend.
They're
and then
looking-
they decide
yeah.
to give up and go home.
Yeah.
He jumped over that fence, man.
So he's gone, bro.
I would say too, it's very interesting that for how horny Shakespeare was, he regulates his like horny spirit to a few characters. Like we've talked about how Mercutio switches. Mercutio's all over the place, but he is very often the mouthpiece for like some of the more explicit, long, drawn out monologues with sexual imagery. And then you have like Romeo, who's so, like pious and Catholic and is saying nice things like, I'm looking through your window and the light's so pretty.
Not everyone in real life is 100% horny 100% of the time. So.
Yeah. Well, and I was also going to say, it is also just a strategy that still happens in fiction of all stripes of having and I think plenty of romance films and rom-coms have the relatively more serious main relationship we are supposed to be following, and then the kookier and or often more sexually loose side characters. I mean, even Adam Sandler movies often follow that basic formula. Or anime all the time has the obnoxiously sex pesty side character.
It reminds me a lot actually of how there's often, and especially in like younger readers, a conflation of what characters value and what you think the author values. You often have people being like, oh, I can't believe you like read these books, the main character believes this and that means the author's a terrible person. And like sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. But I can definitely imagine, especially in a time when the queen could just decide that it's time for you to get hanged, making sure that it's clear that, the main characters have good morals and are perfect Christian boys, and the side characters can have the funny stuff, but that's just like a clown, it's not really me. So I can see that there's a political aspect there too.
Yeah, because I mean, there would be I forget the exact government apparatus behind this in Elizabethan and Jacobean times, but I mean, there would be authorities who would read through and censor works that were seen as politically inflammatory or blasphemous. So then as now, I mean, there were censors who would read things and show up and complain if you put on a play they didn't like and make you change it.
From the creation of the printing press, like there was also a creation called the Index, which was a list of everything you weren't allowed to print because it was heresy.
Yeah.
So censorship has been there right like 1 second after any sort of like writing or anything. It's always been like one step behind to be like, no, not that. That's too horny.
Go to horny jail.
Yeah, we're on the same page.
Although I'm sure there were then as now plenty of people basically just doing the bare minimum to sidestep around to the censors. I know in the Victorian era there were all kinds of bawdy plays that only were put on in gentlemen's clubs. Like my favorite of all time for the title, I have not read it. I feel like I don't need to. The title of the play is Lady Bumtickler's Revels.
Wow.
Why have you not read it, bro? I don't know why you didn't read that.
I don't think anything of the content of the play could possibly be better than the title.
Well, I have a good point there. You might be surprised, man.
That could be. It could turn out to be a Victorian masterpiece.
I'd be one of those like interactive experiences.
I have a feeling it was just a burlesque for
We
men
call
in their
that
30s
immersive
and
theater
40s
now.
with high libidos and opinions I would not like to hear in real life.
I also want to point out Mercutio's like Romeo is drunk, staring at an ash-shaped fruit, just like, oh, if only I could pluck it that easily.
I love the fact that like a very common fruit is just like colloquially known as an open ass.
We have that nowadays with peaches because of the emoji.
And
Yeah.
eggplant.
Eggplants. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. What other fruit?
Bananas. It's kind of a short scene, isn't it?
It
It's sort
is.
of just a reminder to the audience of where we've been and what's at stake before Romeo and Juliet meet again.
Yeah,
It could
and
be
there's
yet
like a
another
short
set
about
change. Next up is the big balcony scene. So they may have had to have rolled in some set piece or something. So it may be something related to that. I think it's in the play, within the play in Hamlet, that they have a joke about the censors, actually, to tie that
Yeah.
idea in. But he's like, oh, beware the censors. But he spells it like a censer you have in a church, like that does do the incense. It's like, oh, beware the censors, they smell or something. And it's just like a joke about the people who would censor the play.
Wow.
Pretty funny. The censorship people, they saw that, they're like, I can't censor that.
Well, I think we're set. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
if you like suggestive fruit,
Ooh.
Like custard pie.
Yeah.
You like suggestive fruit. Yeah, what other fruit are suggestive? Think about
Comment your
Comment
favorite.
below.
Comment
Your
your
favorite,
favorite
yeah.
suggested fruit.
it. Yeah, or food. It doesn't have to be fruit.
subscribe to Get on That Balcony.
So in lately, get on that balcony.
Subscribe if you think it should be a balcony, not just a boring window.